on the phone with my mother, and I haven't lived at home in a couple of years, and so she was asking me about how I was doing with feeding myself. And so, of course, I told her what I think most of us possible would tell her. Vending machines and 10 for $1 deals. Alright? And so, my mother's Jewish, most of my family is Jewish, and so one of the scary questions, she asked me where I got my bread, and I had to tell her that I've been buying it from Stater Bros. And she got really, really angry with me, and she hung up, and she was like, "You're gonna die of cancer," and here's why she feels this way. According to Trent Hall, author of several different cookbooks, store-bought bread contains a list about a foot long of preservatives. And according to angry toxicologists, those preservatives cause hyperactivity, ADD, and some types of bread can increase your chances of getting liver cancer by over 3 times. So, making bread at home is really quick and easy, and I'm going to demonstrate to you how to make my own olive cheese bread. First, I will show you how to make the dough. Second, I will show you how to add ingredients during the rising process. And third, I will show you how to bake your bread. Now, you're going to need, to start to make your dough, you're going to need a bread machine. You can get these for about $12 at a thrift store. Pretty easy. I like to use half white flour because it tastes better. Because if you use whole wheat flour, the taste is really overpowering. So I like to mix 1 cup of whole flour and then 1 cup of white flour. And usually you could just put this into your bread machine. It comes with this tin, but because I can't turn it on because this takes 3 hours, I'm just going to make it by hand down here. You want about a teaspoon of salt, and about a tablespoon of sugar, this was the sugar, this was, that was the rest of the flour, this is the sugar, and you're going to want about 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. Now, you want to be careful with the yeast because, oh my gosh, I forgot water. Okay, well, I'm going to pretend that I have water. You're going to need about 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast, and you don't want to mix the yeast with the water right away. Because as soon as the yeast mixes with the water, it's going to start bubbling because it's alive and it's going to start rising. So you want to be sure that everything else is ready before the water mixes in with it. And so you want to mix it up, and it'll form a really, really sticky dough ball. And it's going to be small. It's going to be about so big. And then if you let it rise for an hour, sorry, because I don't have water. I don't know where I left it. But after you let it rise for an hour or so, we can move on to our second step, whereas when we get to add our cute little other ingredients on top. And after about an hour, you're going to take your little dough ball, and it's going to about double in size, or triple in this case. Good looking bread. You're going to see a lot of holes in the dough too. That's when you know it's ready, and the bread machine will do this itself. It'll beat after about an hour or so when you can start adding other ingredients. And while it rises, I like to go ahead and start chopping up my ingredients of olives for this type of bread. You want to cut these up into about 8s, really pretty small. You want to get pretty small pieces because this is going to go directly into the bread and it's going to bake. And the oils are going to leak into the bread around it, and it's really going to flavor the bread really well. But if you have like whole chunks, it's not going to get through the dough very well. I always like to add my olives a little bit earlier because the bread machine will knead the bread, and then it'll let it rise, and then it'll knead the bread again, and let it rise again, and then it starts cooking after that. So, but when it kneads it this first time, because it's still trying to mix the powder in. It tends to get, like it needs it too much at first to be able to add whole ingredients like this. It'll mince them into basically nothing, especially if you want to put berries in your bread. You want to make sure that you add them later in the process. And your bread machine will beep and tell you. It takes about 3 hours. It has different time settings as well. They're really, really useful. So in this case, I would add olives in and about an hour into the baking process while it's still going to need it the second time around before it starts cooking and melts everything. I have all chopped up here already. And then it's going to knead this in, and then it's going to rise again. Now, after the second time that it rises, before it starts cooking, that's when you want to add ingredients that melt. Ingredients like cheese or something like that. You definitely want to wait till later because it'll mix it into the bread so thoroughly that there will be no cheese taste or chunks left at all. So you definitely want to wait until a little bit later. Process. I like using cheddar for this bread. You can use really whatever you want, and this recipe is really easily customized as well. I know my grandmother, she used to make her famous onion soup dip bread, and my mother always loved making this banana nut bread that nobody actually liked, but everybody ate. She made some really bad batches before she got a bread machine too. It's a really interesting process because the way the bread rises really changed the way it's going to cook. My mom always thought of it as an art, like the art of making bread. I think of it a lot more as a science because yeast is alive and it's an active ingredient and it is on a time setting. So you have to listen to the time. And after the second time that it rises, it'll be about a half an hour before it starts cooking, so about 2.5 hours into the process. I like to sprinkle my cheese over the top of my bread. And then close it up, and it'll start the cooking process. The entire machine is going to get really, really hot, so I would back away from it for about the next hour because even during the cool down, you can still burn yourself on this thing. And immediately after you make the bread, you can't just start another loaf. So I know I messed up. I mixed my yeast and water before the bread machine was done cooling down, and I couldn't start it kneading. So I had to mix it by hand, which it gets really, really messy. It's really sticky. So it's a lot easier to let the bread machine mix your dough. And after it cooks, you will get this beautiful finished product. Delicious homemade bread. No preservatives, which means this will only last about 4 days, but honestly, I've never had a loaf last more than an hour out of the oven. So, really good bread though. So, today I've taught you how to make homemade olive cheese bread. I've shown you how to mix the dough. I've shown you how to let the bread rise and add ingredients during the rising process so that they don't get too mixed in. And I've shown you how to bake the bread. Now, if I had been doing this a couple weeks ago before I got on the phone with my mother, I wouldn't have gotten the angry Jewish screaming over the phone, and I probably would have been a lot healthier in these past couple of weeks.